Sophie's Adventures, written and read by Nana for Sophie. Chapter 1. Sophie's Special Day. Sophie bounced out of bed, her curly blondish brown hair a tangled mess from a night of restless sleep. She rubbed the sleep from her eyes, her pink glasses slipping down her nose. Today was a special day, and she couldn't wait to get started. Her Nana and Granddad were coming over for a visit, and Sophie had so much to tell them. She threw off her covers and jumped out of bed, her feet patting softly on the carpet as she made her way to the window. She pulled back the curtains, and a bright beam of sunlight streamed in, illuminating her room. Sophie smiled, feeling the excitement build up inside her. She loved days like this, when her Nana and Granddad came to visit. It always felt like a holiday, even if it was just a regular Saturday. Sophie quickly got dressed in her favorite outfit, a bright yellow sundress with white flowers, and ran downstairs to the kitchen. Her mom was already up, making pancakes with Sarah and brewing coffee. The delicious smell of freshly cooked breakfast filled the air, making Sophie's tummy rumble with hunger. "Good morning, Soph," her mom said, giving Sophie a warm hug. "I know you're excited about Nana and Granddad's visit. Are you going to help me get everything ready?" Sophie nodded eagerly, taking on the important task of setting the table. She carefully placed the plates, forks, and knives in their proper places, making sure everything was just so. Her mom smiled, impressed with Sophie's attention to detail. Sophie, Jensen, Sarah, and their mom enjoyed a big, yummy breakfast and cleaned up afterwards. Jensen was very calm and patient, and Sophie again did a great job, so they got to add to the warm and fuzzy jar. Sophie chattered excitedly about all the things she wanted to tell her Nana. She had so many stories to share about her adventures with her friends Bailey and Lily, and about the time she and her little brother Jensen had built a fort in the backyard, and about the new book she was reading in school. Just then, the doorbell rang, and Sophie's heart skipped a beat. Her Nana and Granddad were here. She dropped the napkin she was holding and ran to the front door, flinging it open to reveal her beaming grandparents. "Nana! Granddad!" Sophie exclaimed, throwing her arms around them both. They hugged her tightly, and Sophie felt all their love. Her Nana, with black hat and warm smile, handed Sophie a small gift. "Happy special day, Sophie," she said. "We brought you a little something to celebrate." Sophie's eyes widened as she opened her hand to reveal a special and rather rare gold dollar coin. She learned all the cool things you can do with a coin like this, besides just spending it. Jensen got a gold coin too, and he had fun watching Sarah teach him how to spin it. Sophie gasped in delight, hugged her Nana tightly. "Thank you, Nana. I love it," Sophie exclaimed. Her Granddad, with his kind eyes and bushy eyebrows, chuckled. "We're glad you like it, Sophie." Sophie beamed with pride, feeling like the luckiest girl in the world. She couldn't wait to show her Nana and Granddad all the things she wanted to share with them. The day was shaping up to be just as special as she had hoped. Sophie excitedly told her Nana and Granddad stories of her adventures. Her Nana listened with a warm smile, asking questions and making Sophie feel like she was the most important person in the world. They spent the afternoon playing fortune-telling games and laughing together. Sophie's little brother Jensen joined in, and soon the whole house was filled with the sound of their giggles and chatter. Chapter 2. Playtime with Bailey and Jensen. The sun was shining brightly in the sky, casting a warm glow over the backyard. Sophie and Bailey were bursting with energy, eager to make the most of their afternoon together. They had been waiting all week for this moment, and finally they had the freedom to let loose and have some fun. Ready, set, go! Sophie shouted, taking off like a shot across the lawn. Bailey was hot on her heels, laughing and chasing after her. They played a game of the floor is lava. They also had fun just darting in and out of the trees, their giggles echoing through the air. Jensen, Sophie's 5-year-old little brother, watched from the sidelines, his eyes wide with excitement. He was itching to join in on the fun, and Sophie knew it. She scooped him up in her arms, spinning him around in a circle. "Want to play with us, Jensen?" she asked, grinning from ear to ear. Jensen, wearing his Batman hat, nodded enthusiastically, his shaggy light brown hair bobbing up and down. Sophie set him down, and the three of them took off playing a wild game of chase. They ran around the backyard, lapping the garden beds and dodging low-hanging branches. As they played, Sophie couldn't help but notice how much Jensen had grown. He was getting taller and more confident every day, and she loved watching him blossom into his own little person. She ruffled his hair, earning a giggle from him, and Bailey joined in, making silly faces at him. After a while, they decided to take a break and cool off. Sophie's mom had set up a table with lemonade and cookies, and they gathered around, parched and hungry. As they munched on their snacks, Sophie had an idea. "Water balloon fight!" she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Bailey's eyes lit up, and Jensen clapped his hands together. "Yes, yes," he chanted, bouncing up and down. Sophie's mom handed out water balloons, and the three of them worked filling them up and preparing for battle. The air was filled with the sound of laughter and splashing water as they launched their attacks. Jensen was a natural, dodging and weaving with ease. Bailey was a bit more clumsy, but she made up for it with her quick reflexes. Sophie was the mastermind, coming up with clever tactics and strategies to outmaneuver her opponents. In the end, they were all soaked to the bone, but they didn't care. They collapsed on the grass, exhausted and exhilarated. As the sun began to set, Sophie and Bailey decided to set up a sleepover in the backyard. They dragged out the sleeping bags and pillows, and Sophie's mom brought out a special treat, a batch of freshly baked s'mores. As they roasted their marshmallows over the fire pit, Sophie and Bailey started telling stories. They made up wild tales of adventures and bravery, using their imaginations to create entire worlds. Jensen listened with wide eyes, his face aglow with wonder. As the night wore on, they settled in for a cozy night of giggling and chatting. Sophie and Bailey whispered secrets to each other, and Jensen snuggled up close, feeling safe and happy in the company of his big sister and her best friend. As they drifted off to sleep, Sophie smiled to herself, feeling grateful for this special day. She knew that she would always treasure this memory, this perfect playtime with Bailey and Jensen. Chapter 3. Meeting Harry. The sun was shining brightly as Sophie's family pulled into the long driveway of the horse farm. Sophie had never been to a horse farm before, and she couldn't wait to see the horses up close. She had always been fascinated by these majestic creatures, watching them gallop and prance on TV and in movies, but she had never actually seen one in person. As they stepped out of the car, Sophie's eyes widened in wonder. The farm was surrounded by rolling green hills and lush pastures, where horses of all shapes and sizes grazed peacefully. Sophie's mom smiled at her excitement. "Okay, Loaf, let's go meet the horses," her mom said, taking her hand. Sophie nodded eagerly, her ponytail bouncing behind her. They walked towards a large barn, where a friendly woman with a kind face greeted them. "Hi there, I'm Karen, the owner of the farm. Welcome to our little slice of heaven." Sophie's mom introduced themselves, and Karen showed them around the farm. They saw horses of all breeds and colors, each one more beautiful than the last. Sophie was in awe, watching as they munched on hay and nuzzled each other. As they walked through the barn, Sophie noticed a particularly stunning horse standing in a stall. He was a beautiful white horse with a shiny coat and a flowing mane. His eyes were kind and gentle, and Sophie felt an instant connection to him. The horse leaned down to Sophie's level, and they shared a special connection. "Who's that?" Sophie asked Karen, pointing to the horse. "Ah, that's Harold, but everyone calls him Harry," Karen replied with a smile. "He's one of our gentle giants. Would you like to meet him?" Sophie nodded eagerly, and Karen led them to Harry's stall. As they approached, Harry nuzzled Karen's hand, and Sophie couldn't help but giggle at his silly antics. "Hi, Harry," Sophie said softly, reaching out her hand. Harry sniffed her hand and then nuzzled it gently. Sophie felt a surge of joy and affection for this beautiful horse. She had never felt such a strong connection to an animal before. "Wow, he's so gentle," Sophie said, stroking Harry's mane. "Yes, he is," Karen agreed. "Harry is one of our therapy horses. He has a special gift for sensing when somebody is upset or scared, and he knows just what to do to make them feel better." Sophie's eyes widened in amazement. She had never heard of a horse like that before. As they spent more time with Harry, Sophie learned all about his personality and his quirks. She discovered that he loves apples and carrots, and that he had a funny habit of nodding his head when he wanted attention. As the day drew to a close, Sophie reluctantly said goodbye to Harry at the farm. Sophie hugged Harry's neck, feeling a pang of sadness at leaving him behind. "Can we come back and visit Harry again?" Sophie asked Karen, looking up at her with pleading eyes. Karen smiled. "Any time, sweetie. Harry would love to see you again." As they drove away from the farm, Sophie couldn't stop thinking about Harry. She had never felt such a strong connection to an animal before, and she couldn't wait to see him again. Little did she know, her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined, all thanks to a beautiful white horse named Harry. Chapter 4: The Unexpected Encounter. Sophie couldn't shake off the feeling of excitement and wonder that lingered long after she left the horse farm. She had never felt such a strong connection with an animal before, and she couldn't stop thinking about Harry, the majestic white horse with the kind eyes. As she lay in bed that night, she found herself replaying every moment of their encounter, from the way he nuzzled her hand to the way he pranced around the corral. The next morning, Sophie ran into the kitchen where her mom was busy making breakfast, Mom, can I go to the horse farm today? Sophie asked, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. Her mom, caught off guard by Sophie's sudden request, hesitated for a moment before responding. Well, sweetie, I don't know if that's possible. We just went yesterday, and I have a lot of work to catch up on today. Sophie's facial expression fell flat, but she refused to give up. She had to see Harry again, and she was determined to convince her mom to take her back to the farm. Please, Mom, just for a little while. I promise I'll be good and help out around the farm, Sophie pleaded, her voice laced with desperation. Her mom, seeing the sincerity in Sophie's eyes, relented. Okay, fine, but just for a few hours, and you have to promise to listen to Mrs. Jenkins and do exactly as she says. Sophie let out a whoop of excitement, hugging her mom tightly. Thank you, Mom. I'll be the best helper ever. As they drove back to the farm, Sophie's excitement grew. She couldn't wait to see Harry again, to pet his soft mane and feel his warm breath on her hand. When they arrived at the farm, Mrs. Jenkins greeted them with a warm smile. Welcome back, Sophie. I'm glad to see you're so enthusiastic about horses. Today, I think it's time you got to ride Harry. Sophie's eyes widened in surprise. Really? I get to ride him? Mrs. Jenkins nodded. Yes, really. But first, we need to make sure you're properly dressed and equipped. Let's get you fitted with a helmet and some riding boots. Sophie nodded eagerly, following Mrs. Jenkins to the tack room. As they saddled up Harry, Sophie felt a thrill of excitement. She had never ridden a horse before, but with Mrs. Jenkins' guidance, she felt confident and ready. As they set off into the woods, Sophie felt a sense of freedom she had never experienced before. The wind whipping through her hair, the sun shining down on her face, and Harry's powerful muscles beneath her. Sophie felt alive. She leaned forward, feeling the rhythm of Harry's gait, and let out a joyful whoop. Mrs. Jenkins smiled, watching from a distance as Sophie and Harry disappeared into the trees. You two are a perfect match, she said to herself, feeling a sense of satisfaction. As they rode off deeper into the woods, Sophie felt a sense of connection with Harry that she couldn't explain. It was as if they were one being, moving in perfect harmony. She leaned forward, patting Harry's neck, and felt a sense of gratitude towards this magnificent creature. After a while, Mrs. Jenkins called out, "Time to head back, Sophie!" Sophie reluctantly guided Harry back to the farm, feeling a pang of sadness that their adventure was coming to an end. As they unsaddled Harry and gave him a well-deserved treat, Sophie turned to Mrs. Jenkins with a beaming smile. "That was the best day ever, Mrs. Jenkins. Thank you so much for letting me ride Harry." Mrs. Jenkins smiled, her eyes twinkling. "Anytime, Sophie. You and Harry are meant to be best friends. I can see it." Sophie nodded, feeling a sense of certainty wash over her. She knew that she and Harry were meant to be together, and she couldn't wait to see what other adventures lay ahead for them. Chapter 5. Gigi's Horse Stories. Sophie's eyes sparkled with excitement as she watched her great-grandmother, Gigi, step out of the car onto the driveway. She had been waiting for what felt like forever for Gigi's visit, and finally, the day had arrived. Sophie loved spending time with Gigi, but she was especially thrilled this time because she couldn't wait to tell her all about Harry, the horse she'd been riding at the stables. Gigi, with her silver hair and warm smile, was a kindred spirit when it came to horses. She had grown up on a farm, surrounded by horses, and had a deep love and respect for them. Sophie knew that Gigi would be fascinated by her stories of Harry, and she couldn't wait to hear Gigi's own horse stories in return. As soon as Gigi had settled into the living room, Sophie pounced, eager to share every detail about Harry. "Gigi, Gigi, I have so much to tell you," she exclaimed, bouncing up and down on the couch. Gigi laughed and held out her arms, inviting Sophie to come closer. "I'm all ears, sweetie," she said, her eyes twinkling with interest. Sophie snuggled up beside Gigi and launched into a detailed account of her riding lessons, telling her about Harry's gentle nature, his shiny white coat, and the way he pranced when he sensed treats were nearby. Gigi listened intently, asking questions and making supportive noises as Sophie spoke. When Sophie finally paused for a breath, Gigi smiled and said, "I'm so proud of you, Sophie. You're a natural with horses. I have a few stories of my own to share if you'd like to hear them." Sophie's eyes widened with excitement. She loved hearing Gigi's stories, and she knew that they would be full of adventure and excitement. "Yes, please," she exclaimed, settling in to listen. Gigi leaned back in her chair, a faraway look in her eyes. "Let me tell you about the time I watched baby horses being born," she began, her voice low and soothing. Sophie's eyes grew wide as Gigi described the miracle of birth, the way the mares would prepare for the foals, and the first wobbly steps of the newborns. Sophie felt as though she was right there with Gigi, watching the scene unfold. "I was just a little older than you, Sophie," Gigi said, "when I started helping out my family's farm. We had a beautiful mare named Starlight, and she was expecting a foal. I was so excited to watch her give birth, and my parents let me stay up late to watch the baby arrive." Sophie was entranced, her imagination running wild as Gigi described the sounds of the night, the rustling of the straw, and the soft nickering of the mare. Finally, after what felt like hours, the foal was born, Gigi said, her eyes shining with excitement. It was a little filly, with a coat as black as coal, and a star-shaped marking on her forehead. We named her Luna, and I was immediately smitten. Sophie felt as though she was right there with Gigi, watching Luna take her first steps, feeling the softness of her fur and smelling the sweet scent of the barn. Gigi told Sophie more stories about the time she had ridden in a horse show, about the horse that had been her best friend growing up, and about the lessons she had learned from her years around horses. Sophie listened, entranced, feeling as though she was part of Gigi's adventures. As the afternoon wore on, Sophie realized that she had been so caught up in Gigi's stories that she had forgotten all about her own riding lessons. But Gigi's stories had reminded her of why she loved horses so much, their beauty, their strength, and their gentle hearts. As the visit came to an end, Sophie hugged Gigi tightly, feeling grateful for the special bond they shared. "Thank you for the stories, Gigi," she said, her voice muffled against Gigi's shoulders. Gigi hugged her back, her eyes shining with love. "Anytime, Soph," she said. "I'm always happy to share my horse stories with you." As Sophie watched Gigi drive away, she felt a sense of contentment wash over her. She knew that she would always treasure the memories of this visit, and she couldn't wait to hear more of Gigi's horse stories in the future. Chapter 6. Sophie's Big Dream. Sophie sat on the fence of the corral, watching Harry graze peacefully in the warm sunlight. She loved spending time with her horse, but lately she had been thinking about something that would make their time together even more special. "Sophie, what's on your mind?" Nana asked, walking up to the fence with a basket of fresh carrots. "You've been staring at Harry for hours." Sophie's eyes lit up. "Nana, I have a big dream," she said, her voice full of excitement. Nana's face broke into a warm smile. "Tell me about it, Soph," she said, setting the basket down and leaning against the fence beside Sophie. Sophie took a deep breath. "I wish Harry could talk to me," she said, her eyes shining with longing. "I know it sounds silly, but I imagine what it would be like to have conversations with him. We could talk about all sorts of things, like the best trails to ride or what his favorite treats are." Nana chuckled. "That doesn't sound silly at all, Sophie. I think it's a wonderful dream. What do you think you'd talk about with Harry?" Sophie's imagination ran wild. "Oh, we would talk about everything. I would ask him about his favorite things, like which fields he likes to graze in or what trails he likes to run on. And I would tell him all about my day, like what I learned in school or what game I played with my friends at recess." Nana nodded, her eyes twinkling. "I bet Harry would love to hear all about your day. He's such a good listener, isn't he?" Sophie nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, he always seems to know when I'm feeling sad or upset. He'll come over and nuzzle me, and it makes me feel so much better." Nana smiled. "That's because Harry loves you, Sophie, and I'm sure he would love to talk to you if he could." Sophie's face fell slightly. "But it's not possible, is it, Nana? Horses can't talk." Nana put a gentle hand on Sophie's shoulder. "Just because it's not possible in the way we think of talking doesn't mean it's not possible in other ways. You and Harry have a special connection, Sophie. You can sense what he's feeling, and he can sense what you're feeling. That's a kind of communication, too." Sophie thought about this for a moment. She'd never thought about it that way before. Maybe Nana Banana was right. Maybe she and Harry did have a special way of communicating, even if it wasn't with words. As she sat on the fence, watching Harry graze, Sophie felt a sense of peace wash over her. She knew that even if Harry couldn't talk to her in words, she could still understand him in her own way, and that was all that mattered. "Thanks, Nana," Sophie said, smiling up at her. Nana smiled back. "Any time, little loaf. Now, how about we give Harry some of these carrots? I'm sure he's been waiting patiently for his snack." Sophie giggled and reached into the basket, pulling out a few juicy carrots. She fed them to Harry, who nuzzled her gently in appreciation. As she stroked his soft mane, Sophie felt grateful for the special bond she shared with her horse, a bond that went beyond words. Chapter 7. More Adventures with Harry. The sun was shining brightly as Sophie and Harry set out on their latest adventure. They had been inseparable since their first meeting, and Sophie couldn't imagine exploring the countryside without her trusty companion by her side. Today, they were headed into the woods, a place Sophie had grown to love almost as much as she loved Harry. As they wandered deeper into the forest, the trees grew taller and the path grew narrower. Sophie felt a thrill of excitement as she pushed aside branches and fought her way through the thick underbrush. Harry trotted along beside her, his ears perked up and his tail wagging enthusiastically. Their mission today was to find the hidden stream that Sophie had heard about from the other kids in the village. Rumor had it that the stream was home to all sorts of aquatic creatures, and Sophie was determined to catch a glimpse of them. Harry seemed to sense her excitement, and he picked up his pace, leading the way through the dense foliage. After what felt like hours of walking, Sophie heard the gentle gurgling of water up ahead. She pushed aside a curtain of vines and found herself standing on the banks of a crystal clear stream. The water was so still that it created a perfect mirror image of the surrounding trees, and Sophie couldn't resist the urge to dip her toes in the cool water. Harry, sensing her hesitation, nudged her gently with his nose, as if to say, "Come on, Sophie, let's explore." Sophie giggled and took a step forward, feeling the water lap at her ankles. Harry followed suit, splashing and playing in the shallow water. As they explored the stream, Sophie spotted all sorts of creatures she had never seen before. There were fish darting through the water, their scales shimmering in the sunlight. She saw frogs perched on rocks, their big round eyes blinking lazily. And she even caught a glimpse of a family of otters, their sleek bodies gliding effortlessly through the water. After a while, Sophie and Harry reluctantly said goodbye to the stream and continued on their way. They had another adventure planned for the day, one that Sophie was particularly excited about. They were headed to the horse farm on the outskirts of the village, where Sophie had arranged to help out with the afternoon chores. As they approached the farm, Sophie could hear the sound of horses whinnying and the rustling of the hay. She felt a thrill of excitement, knowing that she was about to spend the afternoon surrounded by her favorite animals. Harry, sensing her enthusiasm, pranced along beside her, his ears perked up, his tail wagging furiously. When they arrived at the farm, Sophie was greeted by the friendly face of Mrs. Jenkins, the farm owner. "Ah, Sophie, I'm so glad you could make it back today. We've got a lot of work to do, and I could use an extra pair of hands." Sophie nodded eagerly, following Mrs. Jenkins to the barn where the horses were waiting. Harry trotted along beside her, his eyes fixed on the horses as they munched on their hay. The next few hours were a blur of activity as Sophie and Mrs. Jenkins worked together to clean out the muck from the stalls, feed the horses, and groom their coats. Sophie loved every minute of it, feeling a sense of satisfaction as she watched the horses thrive under her care. As the afternoon drew to a close, Sophie said goodbye to Mrs. Jenkins and thanked her for the opportunity to help out. She turned to Harry, who was waiting patiently by her side. "You were a big help today, Harry," she said, scratching behind his ears. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Harry wagged his tail and nuzzled her hand, as if to say, "I'll always be here for you, Sophie. We're a team, remember?" Sophie smiled, feeling a sense of gratitude to her loyal companion. She knew that she and Harry were more than just friends. They were a partnership, a bond that couldn't be broken. And as they walked back through the woods, the sun setting behind them, Sophie knew that she would always cherish their adventures together. Chapter 8. Nana's Special Words. Sophie's eyes sparkled with excitement as she watched her Gigi, Nana, and Granddad step out of the car and onto the driveway. It had been 2 weeks since their last visit, and Sophie couldn't wait to share all her latest adventures with them. She ran to greet them, throwing her arms around their waists and squeezing tight. "Nana, Nana, I've got so much to tell you," Sophie exclaimed, bouncing up and down like a rubber ball. Nana laughed and hugged Sophie back, her eyes shining in the sunlight. "Well, well, well, look at you all full of energy and excitement. I can see you've got a lot to share with me. Let's get comfortable and you can tell me all about it." Sophie nodded eagerly, leading Nana to the porch swing where they could sit together and chat. As they settled in, Sophie began to recount every detail of her latest escapades with Harry. She told Nana about the time she explored the woods and discovered a hidden stream, about the way Harry's mane felt like silk in her fingers, and about the way he always seemed to know exactly when she needed a friend. Nana listened with a warm heart, her eyes twinkling with delight as Sophie spoke. She asked questions and made supportive noises, encouraging Sophie to keep talking. As Sophie chattered on, Nana's face grew more and more radiant, filled with love and pride for her little granddaughter. When Sophie finally paused for a breath, Nana reached out and gently stroked her hair. "Sophie, my dear, you are the greatest little girl there ever could be," she said, her voice filled with conviction. "You have a heart full of love and a spirit full of adventure. I'm so proud to be your Nana." Sophie's face lit up like a sunflower, and she beamed with pride. She felt like she was walking on air, her heart full of joy and gratitude. She knew that she was lucky to have a Nana like hers, one who always knew just what to say and make her feel special and loved. She felt this way about Granddad and Gigi too. "I'm so lucky to have you, Nana," Sophie said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You always make me feel better when I'm sad or scared. And Harry, oh, Harry is the best horse in the whole world." Nana smiled and hugged Sophie tight. "I'm so lucky to have you too, Soph. And I'm so glad you found a friend like Harry. He's a special horse and deserves a special girl like you to love him." As they sat together on the porch swing, Sophie felt a sense of contentment wash over her. She knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she could face them with courage and confidence, knowing that she had her family and Harry by her side. After all, difficult roads often lead to beautiful destinations. After a while, Nana glanced at her watch and stood up. "I'm so sorry, Sophie, but we have to go soon." Sophie nodded, feeling a pang of disappointment. She didn't want Nana, Granddad, or Gigi to leave, not yet, but she knew that they had to go, and she was grateful for the time they had together. As they hugged goodbye, Nana whispered something in Sophie's ear. "Remember, Sophie, no matter what happens in life, you are loved and special and capable. Always remember that, okay?" Sophie nodded, feeling the words sink deep into her heart. She knew that she would carry Nana's special words with her always, and that they would give her the strength and courage she needed to face whatever lay ahead. As Nana, Granddad, and Gigi drove away, Sophie watched her go, feeling grateful and happy and full of love. She knew that she was one lucky girl to have a Nana like hers, and she couldn't wait for their next adventure together. Sophie and Jensen got ready for bed, Sophie gazing at her special snow globe collection as she drifted off to dreamland. They both had happy dreams, full of adventure and excitement. The end. Written by Nana for Sophie. Always remember, we love you.